Good morning, friends. Welcome to my channel. My name is Arun Nagar. So, in the last session, we have discussed about the Linux architecture and features of the Linux when compared with the other operating systems. So, today we are going to discuss about the Linux file system. See, for any operating system, you should know the underlying file system, because if you know the file system structure, so you will get to know that how the directories files are going to be organized in a operating system. So actually Linux is following one hierarchy. So Linux follows system hierarchy called FHS. It means file system hierarchy standard. So any operating system, the hierarchy is very important, because based upon the hierarchy you can identify the directories and files in the operating system. Suppose, so as generally we are using Windows operating system, right? So as we know, Windows is a user interface operating system. So you can navigate to the any directory easily, like under C there are some other folders are there, under D there could be some other folders are there. You can easily navigate to the your desired folder. But in case of Linux, so in most of the case, Linux we operate as a command line operating system only. I mean, you do not get any interface for to interact with the your files and directories. So Linux is a CLI based OS. I mean, in Linux, user interface operating system flavors are there, but in most of the time we will use CLI only. So like Red Hat and other flavors, like what we discussed in yesterday. So actually it has a file system like so this directory we will call it as a root directory. So in Linux, this is the parent directory for all the other directories and files in the operating system. So this is the parent directory and entry point of the file system in your Linux OS. So under this directory only all other directories should present. So under this directory there are some different directories are there, and each directory has its own use case. Like suppose, basically it follows some tree structure, like this is the parent directory for all other directories in the operating system. So under this all other directories will comes. Suppose when you want to go to any directory in the operating system, first you should enter into this slash, I mean root directory. So then you should navigate to the other directories in the file system. So there are some directories called so as we know, so this is the root directory. The root directory, one second. Just focus on today's class, because if you understand the file system hierarchy, so it will very useful while you doing any. So this is the root directory for the Linux file system. We can think like this is the starting point. Then we have slash bin directory. So each directory contains different files and each directory serves different purposes. So slash bin contains like it contains all the binaries of the operating system commands. See, as I mentioned, Linux is the CLI based operating system. So if you want to perform any activity in the Linux, you should use some commands, right? Like if you want to list out all the files in the directory, generally we will use ls. Or if you want to create a file, we will use cat or touch. So to work these commands, it requires some binaries in the backend. So that binaries is present in the slash bin directory. So slash bin means it contains all the binaries for the operating system commands like ls, cat, cp, move, all the commands which we generally use on the daily basis. That commands binaries is present in the slash bin folder. So next one is slash boot. So as the name indicates, boot means bootable files. It contains the files required for booting the system. So booting is nothing but restarting your system, like including the Linux kernel. So you know kernel, we discussed earlier class. Linux kernel like init rt images and like bootloader files. So all these files which are present in this directory. Next one is slash dev. So it contains device files. Device files like which we use to communicate with hardware devices. See, in the underlying infra we have CPU, RAM and memory, right? So to interact with them, so this directory will use. Basically this directory has some device files which will help us to interact with the underlying system. The next one is slash etc. Contains system wide configuration files such as like network settings, user accounts. In Linux we will create users, right? That users configuration files will present in this directory, and system services also. Suppose if you have installed any HTTP server or any other server, so that server's system D files is present in this directory slash etc directory. Next one is slash home. So slash home is nothing but, so when you create a user in Linux, for that user the operating system will create one home directory for that user. So that directory actually will present here. So it contains users home directory. So for every user there could be one user home directory. So that home directories, all home directories present under slash home. Next one is slash lib. So lib means libraries. So to run your operating system, so the operating system requires some libraries. So that library files generally present in here. So contains system libraries required by programs on the system. Next one is /mnt. /mnt generally we will use for this is like a mount point for temporary file systems. Like suppose we will attach some pen drives and external hardwares, right? So to work that external devices, that requires one mount point. So that mount point will get from mnt directory, like such as external hardwares, external devices like hard drives, USB, so etc. So the next one is opt/opt. So opt means optional directory. Basically generally if you want to install any third party softwares or applications into your Linux system, so generally we will use this directory. Like if you want to download any third party softwares or applications, generally we will use this directory. So contains optional software packages that are not part of the core system. I mean, so when you install operating system, there could be some packages will install which operating system is depends on. So apart from that, generally we will install our own packages, sometimes based upon our requirement. So those type of applications and packages will fall under /opt directory. So generally while installing the applications, we will just use this directory for the downloading path. So the next one is /proc. So it contains virtual files that provides information about system hardware and running processes. So it has some virtual files, like not physical files. It contains some virtual files which gives some information about the system hardware. Suppose if you want to know the suppose this is assume that in the server you install some RHEL flavored Linux machine. So if you want to know the version of the RHEL, so that version related information we will get it in from the /proc. So that type of file generally this proc file contains. So by using that proc we can get to know that which release version we have used. So those type of information generally we will find it in this directory. Next one is /root. So in Linux actually by default one user comes. So when you install an operating system, there could be one user, right? In Windows or in Linux, any operating system there could be one user. So with that user only the installation process is going to happen. So in Linux there is a there is a user called root. So he is the super user in the system. I mean he can do anything. So he doesn't have any limitations to perform any activity. He can do anything in the system. So that way we will call it as a root user. So root user's home directory is this one. So /root is super users home directory. So for normal users, slash home is the home directory for the normal users. For super user, slash root is the home directory. So just remember that. Next one is sbin. So in the bin file, we know it contains all the operating system command related binaries, but in sbin it contains all the system binaries, contains all the system binaries used for system administration tasks. So system administration tasks, something like, suppose if you want to create one user, so to create that user we will use some commands, right, like user add, group add. So those type of libraries will present under sbin. Suppose if you want to add some one disk, extra disk to the Linux machine, so to perform that we will use some commands. So that type of commands libraries present in the sbin directory. Next one is slash temp. Actually this is the temporary file system. Suppose if you want to do any POC activity or some any activity which doesn't require to store any data, so in such situation generally we will use this directory. This is like a directory for temporary files, the files which you don't want to save in the operating system. So those type of files generally present here. So slash temp. So next one is slash user. So it contains files related to user applications. Like source code or something like that. So as a Linux user, definitely I will install something, right, in the operating system. So though that type of files data will falls under slash user. So the next one is slash var. Contains variable files such as log files and mail spools and some temp files generated by system. So these are the main directories which Linux file system hierarchy have. So first we will recap. So slash is the main root directory for the operating system. The all other directories in the Linux operating system will comes under this one only. Assume like this is like a tree structure. So this is the main entry point of your operating system. So if you want to navigate to any directory in the operating system, first you should go to this directory, then from there you should navigate to any directory in the operating systems. So this is the main entry point to the operating system file systems. So slash bin, so it contains all the binaries of the operating system commands. So generally, so in Linux we will use commands, right? For every activity we will use commands. So if that command should work, it requires some binaries in the operating system, right? So that binaries will present under slash bin directory. So slash boot, so it contains booting system files, configuration files. Like suppose if you want to restart your Linux server, so to restart your Linux server it follows some procedure, right? So that procedural documentation and all the stuff will will present under slash boot directory. So slash dev files, it contains device files like suppose you had done some activity in the Linux and that requires some communication with the underlying infra like CPU, RAM and hard disk. So to communicate that activity, slash dev directory is helping us. Slash etc, it contains all the system wide configuration files. Suppose if you install any web server like Nginx or HTTPD, so if you want to change the default behavior of Nginx, there is one configuration files called nginx.conf. So that conf file present under this directory. And slash home, so this is the home directory for the users in the Linux machine. So for root directory, slash root is the home directory. For normal users, under slash home, there could be one directory gets created whenever you create any user in the Linux. And then next one is slash lib. So it contains system by libraries required by the programs. I mean, for running some application, so that application requires some libraries from the operating system. So it will get from this directory. Next one is MNT. So this is the mount point for temporary file systems, such as if you have attached any hard disk or external hard disk, and if you have attached any USB. So sometimes we will use some external hard drives, right, for copying data or something. So when you attach something externally, so it will get attached under this MNT directory. This is the optional directory slash OPT. So if you want to download any package or any software, so generally we will use this directory to download for the packages. Slash proc, it contains virtual files. It doesn't contain any physical files. It contains virtual files, but that virtual files has some data about the system information like your operating system version and your operating system release version and all the other stuff. So slash root is the root directory for the super user, and slash sbin is it contains system binaries used for system administration tasks, like if you want to add some new disk to the system, so it requires slash sbin for doing that activity. Slash m is the temporary directory for files. I mean, if you want to if you are doing something and you don't want to save the data, so in such case generally we will use slash temp as a directory to store that files. Slash usr means it contains files related to user applications, like suppose sometimes user will use some data which he want to store. So in such case generally user will use slash usr. Suppose you have installed some Jenkins server in the Linux machine, so that by default the Jenkins server home directory will falls under slash user slash lib slash Jenkins. So those type of scenarios generally the user directory will helps us. Slash var, it contains variable files such as it contains system log files, like so in Linux there is a main log file called var log messages. So this file actually present in the slash var directory. So based upon the log messages only you can identify what are the errors we are facing in the Linux server. So system logs and daemon logs, everything we will find out under slash var directory. And also this var directory contains some other files related to mail and some temporary file system also it contains, which system is uses. So in addition to this directory, there are other directories and files that are used for specific purposes on a Linux machine. So and also the user can create their own directories and files to organize this data. So I mean to say, you should not only use these directories which comes by default. So user can create his own directories and he can organize his data. So now we will discuss about the Linux file system hierarchy is very clear, I guess. So now we will discuss about the types of files in Linux operating system. So basically in Linux there are different files are there. First thing is regular files. See, these all are Linux basics. If you are strong enough in basics, you can easily get the Linux concepts. Most common type of files this is. So like text file, image file, audio file, video file, those type of files we will call as regular files. Next one is directories. So as we know, directory is nothing but a folder. So under folder these files will be present. This is just direct answer, like directories means it's nothing but a folder. Next, links file. So in Linux there is a concept called symbolic links and there is a concept called symbolic links. I mean, suppose for example, you have an important file which presents under /var/lib some under Arun folder. You want to access some demo.conf file. So to access that file, every time you should go to you should navigate. I just mentioned, right? So if you want to navigate any folder in the file system, first you should go via / only. So / is the parent directory for all other directories in the Linux machine. /var. So every time you should go to this directory and you need to open this file. So what these link files will do, right? It will create one link from the current directory and you can open from that directory. So for that purposes, generally we will use links files. So links. So symbolic links, also known as soft links and hard links. Basically we do have two types of links are there. So we will discuss later what is symbolic link and what is soft link and what is hard link, what is the difference between them. So the next file type is block devices. So these files generally represent device files. Which stores data in blocks like hard drives or USB. Next one is char devices, I mean character devices. So it represent devices that read or write data character by character. Generally sometimes the data should read by character. So those type of files generally we will call it as char devices. So generally rarely we will see this type of files. So but you should know the all type of files which are present in the Linux machine. Named pipes. This is also known as FIFO. We will call it as FIFO. First in first out files. So first in first out. These are used for inter-process communication. So there are different processes could be running in the machine, right? So to make communication between them, so we will generally create this type of files like named pipes. Other name is FIFO. Next one is socket files. Socket files generally are used for inter-process communication between different different machines. I mean, so this generally used for between different machines. So the named pipes files generally we will use for inter-process communication in the system, but socket file generally we will use for inter-process communication across the system. Special files. So special files generally we use to provide access to system resources like such as /dev/null, which is used generally we will use to discard our data, or like /dev/random, which provides random data. So generally these are used to provide access to system resources such as /dev/null. So null is nothing but 0. So if you want to nullify any data, generally we will use this directory to nullify data. Nullify means you don't want to save any data, you want to discard the data. So this is similar to temp file system only, but here the data gets discarded. So these are just a few types of the files in the Linux. There are some other types of the files used for various purposes, like such as configuration files, log files, and many more. So I hope you understand the types of files in the Linux system. These are the main types of the files in the Linux system. So regular file is nothing but generally we will create text file or some files, right? So those files comes under regular files, and it will give. So we in next session we will see each type of the file will looks different in the operating system. Suppose based upon the symbol only we can identify this file is belongs to regular file, and this file belongs to directory, and this is the file belongs to block device. So based upon the identification only we will make sure that this type of files is belongs to named pipe. So based upon that we will identify. So those type of symbols generally we will see in the next class. So we will you got it right. I mean, like so there are different types of files in the Linux OS. Generally we will call all these type of files, generally we will call it as a files only, but based upon their characterization and nature of the working, so generally they have classified like regular files. It's like something like images, like videos or something like that. So directories, this is nothing but a folder. So links are nothing but it if you want to do some shortcut to the particular directory or particular file, generally we will use soft links and hard links. So block device is nothing but it represents the device files which stores data in the blocks. Generally in AWS there is a device called EBS. So actually that EBS generally it stores the data in the blocks. So those type of files generally we will call it as a block devices. And character devices is nothing but it will read data character by characters. Generally in the file, if the data gets read by the entire data gets read at once, but in character devices the data gets read by character. So based upon the requirement, generally we will use this type of files. So the named pipe is nothing but FIFO, I mean first in first out. These are used for inter-process communication. The socket files is nothing but this is also we will use for inter-process communication between different machines. Generally in Docker installation there could be a socket file called unix.sock. So using that socket file only, generally Docker client will communicate with the Docker daemon. So those type of scenarios, generally this socket file gets helpful for us. So special files is something like which you want to access system resources like /dev/null. So in such cases generally we will use. So that's it. So today we have discussed about the file system hierarchy in Linux and types of files we do have available in the Linux machine. So thanks for watching.